Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, and we are going through the book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious by Addington Bruce. If you just found us at this video and would like to catch up, please do visit my book playlist. And I want to say welcome. And to our subscribers here, thank you so much for your support. I hope that you're enjoying this book. Please do leave me your comments. Now I turn the page to the next chapter, Your Memory. Another and most important faculty greatly stimulated by interest is memory. Frequently the question is put to me, what can I do to improve my memory? It is treacherous even in regard to important business matters. Details which I ought to remember slip entirely out of my mind, often at serious cost to me, and always at great embarrassment. There must be a way which I can overcome this unfortunate tendency to forget. Can't you offer a helpful suggestion? The most helpful suggestion I can offer to those whose memory for business details is weak is to advise them to cultivate a keener interest in their work. Special causes for forgetfulness, of course, may be operant. Of these I shall have something to say later, but speaking generally, when a man forgets business matters which he should without fail remember, it is pretty sure sign that he is not so interested in his work as he might be. Memory power, understand well, is largely dependent on the degree of attention paid to whatever is to be remembered. And attention varies directly with the degree of interest felt. Besides which, interest leads not merely to the paying of attention, but to frequent thinking about the things to which attention is paid. This has a direct and determining influence on memory development. As was long ago pointed out by the psychologist William James, quote, "The secret of a good memory is the secret of forming diverse and multiple associations with every fact we care to retain. But this forming of associations with a fact, what is it but thinking about the fact as much as possible? Briefly, then, of two men with the same outward experiences and the same amount of native tenacity, the one who thinks over his experiences most and weaves them into systematic relations with each other will be the one with the better memory." End quote. Footnote from the book The Principles of Psychology. End footnote. Obviously, when interest in one's work is weak or comparatively weak, there will be scant forming of association links in the mind through attention and reflective thinking about the business details. It is important to remember. The mind will busy itself with other things, and if interest in those other things is keen, a surprising memory power for them may result, contrasting strangely with the weakness of memory for business matters. Thus, for example, we see many men displaying almost incredible memory power for the records of baseball teams and players, of aspirants for pugilistic honors, of six-day bicycle riders. Yet these same men may be quite unable to carry in their minds price lists, business appointments, etc. If, then, you are among the habitually forgetful of things having to do with your business, examine yourself closely with respect to the interest you feel in that business. If you find, as you are likely to find, that your interest in it is pale and thin, at once set about cultivating a genuine enthusiasm for it. Otherwise, all training methods will fail to overcome the memory weakness for which, at bottom, you are yourself responsible. With real interest lacking, appreciable memory improvement can never be achieved. But, you may say, it is not so much a general weakness of memory of which I complain. I have a good enough memory on the whole, but I have special memory defects. I am particularly forgetful of names and faces. Is there any way by which I can correct that? Decidedly there is, and decidedly those forgetful of names and faces should try to improve themselves in this respect. For such forgetfulness is a distinct handicap in winning business success, and so far as correcting this special weakness of memory is concerned, the forgetful ones need, first of all, to appreciate that one of the fundamental laws of memory is that any impression is better remembered in proportion as it is vivid and closely attended to. Quite evidently, names and faces make no vivid impression on them, and they do not attend to them closely enough. To obtain increased vividness of impression, they will find it helpful, whenever they are introduced to anybody, to repeat his name aloud, at the same time looking at him directly and attentively. Instead of merely saying in a perfunctory way, "Glad to meet you," let them say heartily, "Glad to meet you, Mr. Jones," or whatever the name may be. If they have not clearly caught the stranger's name, they should make sure of it at once by asking him or the introducer just what his name is. Also, they should mentally link his name with the introducer's, should make a mental note of the place of meeting, and should also note mentally and particular note of discussion. In this way, by multiplying associated ideas, they will make the first impression more vivid and complete. Next, at the earliest opportunity, they should jot down in a notebook carried for the purpose the items they have mentally noted. Thus, quote, "Mr. Jones, introduced by Mr. Brown at the luncheon club, talked of business and golf," end quote. That night, before retiring, they should look at this memorandum and recall all the circumstances, dwelling especially on the name and the appearance of the man they have met. In the morning, they should again do this, and should do it at intervals for some time. The effect will be to help fix the desired memory image in their mind by frequency of repetition. As a result, when they next meet the man in question, they will not be embarrassed by their old-time forgetfulness. Moreover, by adopting this method, they will in time find themselves less and less dependent on their notebook, for they will be training their minds unconsciously to record names and faces in the improved way they have been recording them consciously. To be sure, they may first have to serve a long and patient apprenticeship in the conscious recording, but if they really wish to improve their memory for names and faces, they will gladly serve this apprenticeship. And similarly, the otherwise forgetful, if they really wish to correct whatever special memory defect troubles them, will not deem it too much trouble to school themselves in obtaining vividness of impression and in multiplying associations of ideas. That, at all events, is what always must be done in obtaining greater control of the memory. It is important to appreciate, furthermore, that, as said at the outset of this chapter, special causes may be at work to affect the memory harmfully. Some of these are psychological, some physiological. For example, anything that obstructs the breathing may exercise an appreciable influence on the ability to remember. This is a fact not nearly so widely known as it ought to be, and one which has been verified by scientific experiment. Particularly impressive are the results of some experiments made in a public school in New York City. The experimenter was the principal of the school, Mr. Felix Arnold, and his subjects were boys in different grades, from 5B through 8A. In making the experiments, paper plugs were inserted in one of the nostrils of every boy. While wearing these plugs, the boys were on several occasions given memory tests, the tests being made increasingly difficult to offset any advantage that might be gained through practice. It was discovered that the plugging of the nostrils acted in two ways to lessen memory power: by distracting the attention so that the boys did not adequately concentrate on what they were told to memorize, and also by impeding the intake of oxygen. The resultant memory weakening was in every case quite marked. To quote the more important findings made by Mr. Arnold in consequence of his experiments, quote, "In all cases of obstructed breathing from whatever source, there will be a loss in the results of memorizing verbal of from 10 to 30%. When the work is new and difficult, the loss will run as high as 50%. In terms of classroom practice, obstructed breathing prevents any progress through drill and hinders assimilation of new matter sufficiently to cause non-promotion of the pupils concerned. End quote. Of course, boys and girls do not ordinarily study their lessons with their nostrils blocked by paper plugs, but too often they do study them with adenoid growths choking the cavity back of the nose, or with the nostrils plugged through sheer lack of cleanliness. Obstructions like these must be removed if memory power is to be properly developed. This is the lesson plainly taught by experiments on the order of those Mr. Arnold made, and it applies to adults as well as boys and girls. In numerous cases, adults, like children, are afflicted with abnormal tissue growths or bony deformities in the nose, impeding the breathing, hence limiting the supply of oxygen to the lungs, and thereby interfering with the nutrition of the brain, to the detriment of the memory in common with the other mental faculties. These growths and deformities need to be treated by competent physicians for the sake of the mental as well as the physical health. Again, the person who wishes to have an efficient memory should avoid excessive physical exercise, which is not to say that he should be afraid of exercising. On the contrary, physical exercise, within reasonable bounds, is of positive and great value as an aid to thinking and remembering. It benefits the mind through its stimulating influence on the whole physical system, including the mind's central organ, the brain. A thinker who does not exercise is sadly handicapped, in contrast with thinkers who do exercise. But this no longer holds true when exercise is carried to such an extreme that it becomes over-exercise. Then the power to think and the power to remember are distinctly weakened, and for a simple reason. Over-exercise involves excessive muscular fatigue. When a person becomes excessively fatigued, poisons are generated in his body. These poisons, getting into the bloodstream, are swept along to the brain. Poisoning the brain, they lessen its functional power for the time being. As an inevitable consequence, it becomes difficult to think and to remember. Indeed, after great bodily exertion, the memory power may fall to the vanishing point. Mosso, the Italian physiologist, who specially studied the effects of fatigue, has strikingly called attention to this. In my own case, he says, I have observed that great muscular fatigue takes away all power of attention and weakens the memory. I have climbed several mountains. I have once been on the summit of Monte Viso and twice on that of Monte Rosa. Yet I do not remember anything of what I saw from those summits. My recollection of the incidents of the ascents becomes more and more dim in proportion to the height attained, and several alpinists who I have consulted agree with me that the last part of an ascent is least distinctly remembered. Varicone, the barrister, well known for his daring ascents, told me that he was obliged to take notes during an ascent because on his return in the evening he remembered almost nothing. One does not have to climb mountains to become over-fatigued physically. A walk continued too long will have the same result. So will gymnastics, rowing, tennis, golf, or any other form of physical exercise. Obviously, people should keep this in mind. Obviously, the rule to follow is not to dispense with exercise altogether, but to exercise in moderation, and never to attempt to think hard or make heavy demands on the memory immediately after exercise that has been productive of any noticeable degree of fatigue. And just as the poisons of fatigue have a bad effect on the memory, so have any other poisons. Anything which causes poisonous products to get into the blood circulating through the brain, or anything which diminishes the amount of the blood supply to the brain, is hurtful to the memory. Hence, those who would retain their memory power at its maximum must keep themselves well nourished, with the digestive and eliminative organs in good working order. They should avoid excesses of all kinds, particularly intemperance in eating or drinking. Overeating and overdrinking invariably cause toxic elements to develop in the system. Fresh air should always be sought, indoors as well as out. The better the ventilation of house, office, store, or factory, the less the liability to fatigue. Everybody knows how rapidly feelings of fatigue develop when in closed, stuffy rooms. Sleep is another and most important factor in the maintenance of physical and mental vigor. 8 hours of sleep is an adequate nightly allowance for most people. A less amount may not give sufficient rest, though this is a matter dependent largely on the individual. On the other hand, excessive sleeping must be avoided as scrupulously as excessive eating or drinking. During sleep, there is a general slowing of the bodily processes. If one sleeps too long, this decreased functional activity may become habitual to the detriment of all the organs and of the brain in particular. Always it should be appreciated that memory efficiency depends on brain efficiency, and that anything which injures the health of the brain is injurious to the memory. Besides which, as said above, psychological factors adversely affecting the memory need to be taken into account. Worry and depression are conspicuous among these, as is indeed commonly recognized. Even more important, though not commonly recognized, is the memory weakening effect of undue sensitiveness to the unpleasant in general. This is responsible for the memory weakness of many a person who, faithfully studying but failing to benefit from courses in memory training, needlessly torments himself or herself with the fear that the memory apparatus may be hopelessly defective. Memory recall, as I have emphasized, depends at bottom on association of ideas. One idea gives rise to another, that to a third, bringing up finally the idea to be recalled. Psychologists have found that if some highly unpleasant idea has a place in the chain of connection, the latter is apt to be broken in order to keep the unpleasant idea from coming up in the mind. At once there results weakness in memory recall, as may perhaps be made clearer by taking an example from real life, the case of a certain forgetful young woman described in Dr. I.H. Coriat's recently published Repressed Emotions. This young woman showed a singular inability to remember even words and phrases in common usage. For one thing, she could not remember the phrase latent powers. If she tried to use this phrase, a memory blocking at once developed. Tunneling into her mind by modern psychological devices, it was discovered that this phrase was associated with the memory image of her brother, who had destroyed his success-winning latent powers through addiction to alcohol. The phrase latent power would make the young woman think of his sad fate, so she forgot it. Similarly with other things she persistently forgot. One and all they were found linked with painful ideas. Consequently, it became apparent that what this extremely forgetful young woman most needed was not memory training, but training in emotional control. Given such training, her memory soon became far less slippery, and perchance, if you at this very moment are accounting yourself a victim of incurable defects of memory, emotional training may be what you too most need. You may need to school yourself to react less violently to the unpleasant, to learn to face painful realities calmly, to cultivate a serene optimism in your attitude to life generally. With increasing control over your emotions, you may then find no need whatever for any systematic training of the memory. End of chapter. Stay right here because we're going to roll on to the next chapter. Before you do that, could you be kind enough, hit that like button, and if this is something that you enjoy, please do subscribe to the channel for more and share it with your friends. So sit back, relax, as I flip the page to the next chapter titled The Art of Forgetting. There is another feature of the memory problem by no means so generally appreciated as it ought to be. This is the fact that if it is important to be able to remember things, it also is important to be able to forget. Non-appreciation of this fact may even lead people to think that they are inferior to others in memory power, as it possibly is leading you to think if, for example, you have recently been paying a visit to your old home in a little country town after an absence of many years. There you met a number of people with whom you had been well acquainted in your boyhood and younger manhood. Naturally, there was considerable swapping of reminiscences, and you were astonished and chagrined to find that you had forgotten much which you would naturally expect to remember. Even incidents in which you yourself played a part had almost completely faded from your memory and were at best remembered only vaguely. Many other happenings which far older fellow townsmen related in great detail you could not remember at all. This has startled you. You are perhaps more than half inclined to consult a doctor with regard to your failing memory. But let me ask you a few questions. These other men, who remember past events so much more clearly than you, are they not men who have spent their days in the humdrum surroundings of the village, whence you departed to try your fortune in the great city? Is it not possible that the past is so vivid to them because of the intervening years have been comparatively empty of fresh experiences? Certainly you know more about a great many things than they do. You have heard more, seen more, lived life more intensely than they, and thought harder with regard to a variety of subjects of more importance than the commonplace occurrences which have dropped from your remembrance. Do you not think it likely that these have dropped solely in order that your memory might be free to retain that which it is infinitely more desirable for you to remember? To have a good forgettery is really as desirable as to have a good memory, or as William James once put it, quote, "The peculiar mixture of forgetting with our remembering is but one instance of our mind's selective activity. Selection is the very keel on which our mental ship is built, and in the case of memory, its utility is obvious. If we remembered everything, we should on most occasions be as ill off as if we remembered nothing. It would take as long for us to recall a space of time as it took the original time to elapse, and we should never get ahead with our thinking." End quote. Footnote from the Principles of Psychology. End footnote. And to borrow an apt illustration from Dr. Carroll, quote, "Watch the trained, systematic man as he rapidly opens his daily mail and sorts its contents. If not accustomed to such methods, you will be surprised, probably dismayed, at the amount of material that never finds an abiding place in drawer, pigeonhole, or classified assortment, but is consigned to the wastebasket. In response to your question, he will probably reply with a serious smile that his wastebasket is the most valuable piece of furniture in his office. Were it not for that, a few weeks would find the room, now the acme of order, piled ceiling high and uninhabitable because of the accumulated mass of useless trash. So is it with a mind which has not attained the power of rejection, has not developed active and aggressive forgetfulness." End quote. Footnote from the Mastery of Nervousness. End footnote. Worst of all is the plight of the man who does not appreciate the importance of forgetting the trivial slights, annoyances, disappointments, and pains of daily life. His tenacious memory for these does more than interfere with his memory for things of real importance to him. It also tends to affect his character, to embitter him, to develop in him the mood of the chronic fault-finder or worrier. Then it is that his health begins to suffer as a consequence of his failure to cultivate the art of forgetting. For his persistent irritability and fretful anxiety slow down in some degree the vital processes. Indigestion, insomnia, nervous exhaustion are logical results. Ability to forget the annoying is his prime need, and ability to forget the annoying depends on just one thing: disregard of the annoying. But how, you may ask, is this desirable disregard to be attained? By adopting a method precisely opposite to that advised for improvement of the memory. That is to say, the attention must be diverted from, not concentrated on, the thing to be forgotten. And so far as possible, care must be taken to exclude from sight and hearing anything which, by association of ideas, might recall it to mind. A friend, let us say, has grievously betrayed your confidence. He has done you an irreparable injury. You feel that you want never to think of him again. You feel, indeed, that it will be wise to forget him as completely as possible, lest remembrance bring unhealthy brooding. In that case, you should at once plunge vigorously into activities that will keep your mind fully occupied. Your work offers a natural means to this end. Engage in it with redoubled energy. Cultivate a new and keener interest in it. Prolong the time which you daily devote to it. In your leisure hours, for some time to come, be careful to avoid the people and places you were accustomed to meet and to frequent with your treacherous friend. If necessary, find entirely different modes of recreation from those you were wont to pursue with him. Suppose it were your custom to go often to the theater with the reptilian friend in question. Avoid the theater for the present. If you and he often dined or took luncheon together in certain restaurants, find other eating places. Destroy or put away all mementos relating to him. In every way, endeavor to weaken the chain of associations that would keep him in remembrance. Thus you will gradually displace an old set of memory pictures by new sets. The time required for the displacement will, of course, vary with the individual. It will depend largely on your sensitiveness and strength of will. The more deeply you feel hurt by your friend's betrayal, the deeper will the memory of it and of him be engraved in your mind. There will be frequent recalls to memory through unexpected happenings that set the associative process to work. A familiar tune whistled by a passerby may make you involuntarily think of the one who has so injured you. The sight or odor of flowers displayed outside a florist's may assail you with a poignant memory of some place where you and the friend you now despise were together. But persevere in your campaign for elimination. Intensify and broaden your interest in your work and in cultural activities outside your work. The reward of forgetfulness will in the end be yours. You will in fact gradually develop all unawares of habit of not thinking of the whilom friend in place of your former habit of thinking of him often. And the stronger the habit of not thinking of him grows, the less painful will it be when chance occasionally brings him back to recollection. Proceed in like fashion with regard to anything else you wish to forget or feel you ought to forget. Find means for diverting your attention from it and breaking the association chain. Always, that is the secret of the art of forgetting. End of chapter. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll meet you at the next video for the next chapter titled Grow in Initiative.